Hello, DCAT, can you hear me?
Welcome, Danvers, to the November 15th Select Board hearing here in the Toomey Room. Sorry to be a little late. We were in executive session, and we'll discuss that later tonight. Matt, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Sure. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Matt. Just make a note that Selectman Trask has joined us virtually from some other place in the earth. I'm not too sure where. Welcome, Gardner. So if the clerk would remind me when it comes to votes, we'll take a roll call vote. All right, thank you. Thank you. Can we have a motion for the approval of the minutes of November 1st?
Motion for minutes of November 1st?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Gardner?
Yes.
Yeah. David?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Dan, yes, thank you. At this time, if there's anybody here for new public business, now's your opportunity. That's not on the agenda. Mr. Bradstreet, do you have something for us?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. If I may, there was an article, or a picture in an article in the paper about the MBTA and their infinite wisdom has decided not to make Danvers a stop. Is that the only stop in town we're assessed for? And if it is the assessment going to go down proportionally?
I'd be surprised if it didn't go up.
So
Knowing the MBTA and all the money they need.
well, with the
We're paying $500,000 a year to have bus service in Danvers, and currently it's just at the mall.
So do we get to charge them with larceny because they failed to provide goods and service? I mean, we're paying a lot of money for something I'm sorry, I digress. I've said it before. I just find it very offensive that they can, I understand they have financial problems. We do. I do. But they're making us the goat of it all.
It's unfair to the riders. It doesn't matter how many there are in town that would need that bus, and they're working on it, and I have some thoughts and comments later on tonight.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just to clarify, the majority of our assessment is related to debt service for the trains and the broader network, not necessarily the service we have in Danvers, which is not good. And Senator Lovely and Representative Kearns have been working hard to be heard, and they've been asking community members to also be heard. We're not giving up yet. I think one of the things we've identified is that there's a left-hand, right-hand issue in terms of DHCD promoting transit-oriented development at the same time that the MBTA is reducing transit. So we're working with our delegation of those, as well as the MMA, to try to point that out and see if we can make some progress in bringing bus service back to the downtown.
Come together and do the right thing. You know, the other one was a minor one. I brought it up before, and it came to mind. My wife and I visited the food pantry today. In the back, I had asked if possible a platform for the dumpster be put there. There's limited parking in there, and the dumpster causes difficulty for the people who have to use the back end of the parking lot to get in and out. I would assume it would be on the list. I don't know how high or low, but I certainly would like to see it made out of something, asphalt, Linpack, something, so that that is put off and doesn't interfere with the parking. I see you writing diligently. Thank you. That's it. That's it. Just those two.
Thank you, Mr. Bradstreet. Anyone else with new public business not on the agenda? Now's your opportunity. Hearing none, we'll go to Number 3, the board will vote to accept gifts in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A. First are benches from the Friends of Danvers Rail Trail, and the second are donations to the Arson Watch Program, DFD. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You summarized it well. We had a $2,500 donation on behalf of Judy Sullivan and Carl Menschel for 2 benches that have been installed along the rail trail, and acceptance of that is requirement per MGL. And then we had a $50 donation to our Arson Watch program. So both gifts need to be accepted by the board.
What's the will of the board?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. With it thank you. With the appropriate letter to be sent, Maureen,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
and the chair, yes as well. Thank you. Both gifts, yes. I read them both, yep. The board will conduct the annual tax classification hearing. Thank you. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While our Chief Assessor, John LaBelle, makes his way to the podium, you did receive materials electronically midweek last week, and then hard copies in your packets to prepare for tonight's hearing. The materials are online, and the Chief Assessor will be walking the board through the presentation that's been prepared, as well as the various motions that are required as part of this annual process.
Thank you. Welcome, John. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good evening. I guess we'll start basically with a little review of what the classification hearing is. The purpose of this is for the Select Board to determine the allocation of local property tax to be borne by the 4 classes of real property plus personal property for fiscal year 2023. In deciding the allocation, the board must adopt the residential factor, or as you usually call it, the CIP shift, and that will then be used to determine the percentage of the tax levy to be applied to each class. And then the Board of Assessors applies those percentages to the valuations to come up with the tax bills. The board must also vote to adopt or not adopt the following: the open space discount, the residential exemption, and the small commercial exemption. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. So these are the 5 things that you'll need to vote on towards the end. The minimum residential factor, or the CIP shift, the selection of an open space discount, the granting of or not granting of a residential exemption, the granting or not granting of a small commercial exemption, and then you'll need to give me the authority to sign off on Gateway for the Department of Revenue. So a little brief overview of how the valuations ended up for fiscal year 23. It's pretty similar to last year. Overall residential makes up 78.2% of the overall valuation. Last year was 77.4, so it's just up slightly. Commercial makes up 15.7%. Last year that was 16.6%. And then industrial makes up 4.3, which is the same as last year. And personal property makes up 1.7%, which is also the same as last year. And this is just this slide just shows a little bit of a historic view of the distribution of the levy and the percentages. So as you can see, it's been slightly going up marginally in the residential side over the last few years. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions along the way.
John, just if you would, kind of,
Yep.
this does not follow along with the printed material, so perhaps
Oh, okay.
let us
Are
know
you
what
looking at
page
the
to go
report?
to. The chart we want to look at.
This chart, I don't.
Is not
believe-
in here.
That's not in the report. I don't know if
But the table below, that's the historic distribution of values?
Yeah, that's
is
on page, that's on page 4, yeah.
Thank you, yep, just keep us in the same page, thank you.
Okay. This is what kind of everyone wants to kind of look at. This is the change in overall values for residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property for fiscal year '23. On the top, let's see if that slide's not in the report.
Okay.
It's just in the, so I'll kind of walk you through it.
Well, the chart on the bottom is in here.
The bottom, the graph on the top.
Yep.
So overall residential values are up 11.3%. Commercial, not following along quite as high at 4.29%. Industrial at 10.7%, and personal property 11.3%. Overall valuations up just over 10%.
John, can you just, for folks watching,
Yep.
remind everybody the valuation period that we're talking about with these percents?
Well,
So
this
the time period we're looking at?
well, this is for fiscal year '23, which began on July 1st.
But the actual valuation, so the.
The
11
valuation date is January 1st of '22.
Right, so there's a slight delay between where
Right,
we are now.
and the values are based on sales data and income data from calendar year 2021.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And overall, I just wanted to kind of point out the differences in parcel count. For the most part, they stayed the same except for personal property. You can see that we lost a net of 68 personal property accounts. We actually had 87 accounts close and 19 new accounts. And the valuation difference, just so you know, those 87 accounts that closed, last year's value was about $890,000. The 19 new accounts were just over $600,000. John?
Sir, when
Yeah.
it refers to personal property taxation, what is personal property as opposed to
Per-
house and the lot?
All right, personal property is business equipment. So if you go into an office, it's their desks, their chairs, their computers, things like that. Within all the commercial and industrial buildings, there are some businesses that are exempt from personal property tax. It also includes utilities, like the gas lines, the overhead electric lines. We have 3 big utilities in town that pay personal property tax.
Bill, to put it in context, they come out and they look in my little 424 square foot office and charge me a percentage at the desk that's sitting there, my telephone, my computer. They don't go into my house and look at my couches and kitchen tables.
Yeah.
I had a question.
Yes, Matt?
So I believe tonight that the board will only consider rates for residential and commercial. So how is this additional information relevant to our charge?
Personal,
the
personal
overall-
property pays the same rate as the commercial and the industrial class.
And then also on this slide here, where you break it out, residential into, is this just for
This is-
informational purposes?
This is, yes. That's just typically, in the last few years, you've seen a breakdown of single-family versus the multifamily, just within the residential class.
Okay.
So you can kind of see where the values,
To see where the increases, you're
Right.
breaking it out?
yeah, they're not even across. You know, overall, residential's up 11.3, but you can see in this slide, it's mostly in the multifamily
Okay.
aspect, with condos seeing the least amount of gain. And when you typically condos, when you see a market change in values going up, stabilizing, going down, condos are usually the first ones to see that reaction,
Yeah.
which is why, you know, and the rental market is still strong, which is why the apartments are doing
Great.
pretty well still.
Thanks for that clarification.
No problem. So now we'll look at a little bit of a levy comparison of this year and last year. This is on page 5 of the report. As you can see, that the maximum allowable levy is up 3.3%, and the actual levy is up just under 3.3% from last year. There is something new in here called amended new growth. You probably haven't seen that before. That's something the state came out with a couple years ago, where if we take growth on a property and then we end up abating it, giving that property an abatement during the year, we have to give some of that growth back the following year. So that's what that is. And growth is, if you put in an addition onto a house, the added value of that addition is considered growth. We get to add that onto the 2.5% that we can increase the levy.
Okay, I have a question
Yes.
about that.
Yep.
Can you talk about the new growth? When is that actually captured? Is it captured in real time from building permits, or is there a lag time from when, like, I think you're relying on Patriot Properties to provide this information?
They pick up some of it during the cyclical inspections that they do for us every year, but a lot of it is picked up on our permanent inspections for, new homes, renovations of homes, that sort of thing.
And there's a lag time for that?
Just within the from fiscal year
Oh,
to
okay.
fiscal year. So we capture it all year long. It goes into my live database. It doesn't show up to the online database until we finish the values. But it's a working throughout the year.
Because new
Number.
growth is important for us, because that's how we compensate for inflation or for other types
Correct.
of expenses.
Correct.
All set, thank you.
Thank you.
And the actual levy, the 89,744,429, that's a number we're going to come back to later on when we actually calculate the tax rate. So speaking of growth, this is actually on page 6. This is just kind of a breakdown of where the growth came from this year. The top part is growth in overall value, and then the bottom part is growth in tax dollars using last year's tax rate. You can see in fiscal year '22, it was pretty even across the board between residential, commercial, and personal property. This year, most of the growth came from residential, but if you look historically within the town, residential typically makes up a large percentage of the growth within the town. So now we're getting into selecting a minimum residential factor. A residential factor of 1 would equate to what we call a uniform tax rate, where both residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property all pay the same rate. Massachusetts general law allows us to adopt a residential factor of less than 1, which has an effect of reducing the residential rate and increasing the rate on commercial, industrial, and personal property. But to calculate the uniform tax rate, the LA4, I believe, is one of the addendums in the
Page 15,
report.
page 15.
Yeah, so we're going to use, this is a breakdown of the different types of property in town, the number of each one. 101s are your single family, 102 is your condos. So it gives you the parcel count for each, the total valuation for each. And then down the bottom, there's a total valuation. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the levy and divide that by the total valuation to get our uniform tax rate, which for this year is $13.54 per thousand. So if you opt not to make a shift, the tax rate is $13.54.
You say this year, fiscal 22?
Fiscal '23.
23.
And it is right now 12.24.
The residential
Yeah.
rate was shifted down to, it was 12.
12.24 per thousand, right? Yeah.
Yeah, in that ballpark, 12.44. I don't remember exactly what it was. And the commercial was a little over $20, like $20.54. This slide here just shows you some historic average single-family tax bills, just to show you where they've been over the the last 10 years or so. This slide, again, it's not in your report, it's just giving you some context of where you ended up last year after the shift with the single families, showing you the state average up top. Danvers is shown in red. So you can see in the surrounding communities, the communities of similar size, you know, your average tax bills were kind of right in the middle.
And by the way, on the spreadsheet you provided, it indicates the current tax rate is $12.66.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe the commercial was 2054. Maybe that's what the
And that's correct.
And this is just some of the historic shifts, again, over the last few years. Showing you the adjusted percentage of the levy between residential and commercial. And again, this is just a kind of community comparison of shifts in the surrounding area. There's a couple communities that don't shift at all. Most shift to some degree. And the next couple of slides are just some examples of what a shift would be this year, just kind of based on some of the ranges you've been in the past. I don't know if you want to skip this for now and go over the other. I believe last year we went and talked about the open space and the other ones before we came back to this one. I'm not sure how you want to handle
No,
it
you
this
can,
year.
yeah, make your presentation, go to the open space, and then we'll come back.
Okay. All right, so the open space, this is the easiest one because Danvers doesn't have anything classified as open space, and I'll kind of clarify that. That's, there's only one town in the Commonwealth that declares anything open space, and that's Bedford. While Danvers has plenty of open space, it's either classified as town-owned land, or most of it falls under what we call chapter land, which is chapter 61. So that's your agriculture, your recreational land. So you can adopt an open space discount if you want, but it's not going to really impact anything. So the residential exemption is a little different. It's not really an exemption. It's more of a shift within the residential class. And how this would be factored is after we determine if you're going to do a shift to commercial, that we would then recalculate the residential tax rate, and it's based on the average average residential bill. You could do a percentage up to 35%. We would subtract that average from everybody's value and then recalculate the taxes. And then there's the small commercial exemption, which again is more of a shift within the commercial class. Industrial properties would not qualify for this, so it's just within small commercial properties. Again, it's an exemption up to 10%, and there's some other stipulations about the value. It has to be under $1 million, and I believe the employees have to be 10 or fewer in town. So those are the four main things you have to vote on tonight.
John, is the problem for you if we vote on 2, 3, and 4 first, and then go back to 1 and 5?
That's fine with me.
Board members, is that agreeable? We take a vote on 2, 3, and 4, and then go back to 1 and 5?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So can I have a
Yes.
motion on number 2?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to adopt the open space discount.
I don't think you'll get a second. Will she? You won't get a second.
No, we've historically not done this one.
Okay.
It's a not.
Okay, not.
You want to change your motion?
Yes, I'll change my motion to not adopt an open space discount. Thank you.
Thank you. David seconded, okay. And we'll take a roll call. Gardner?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Dan? Thank you. Number 3 says motion to grant or not grant a residential exemption. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to not grant a residential exemption.
Is there a second?
Second.
David, okay. In favor, Gardner?
Yes.
Motion. David?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Dan, yes, okay. Number 4 is a motion to grant or not grant a small commercial exemption. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we do not grant a small commercial exemption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Maureen?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
Dan, yes. Okay, now we'll go to number 1. Go back to the chart, and
Yeah, in your packet, you should have a full breakout of all the options available.
we do.
Okay.
And I'll just throw out a number for conversation. I'm looking at adopting a rate of 1.4750, which would give the total residential, not all of them, an increase of 3.15% versus the commercial increase of 3.31%. Looking at the increase that seemed to me to be as fair as you can be, which is hard to do, but that's the number that I'm looking at. And I'll take conversation,
Can you repeat the number, please?
1.4750.
And what is the current ship for FY '22?
1.4222.
As the values have gone up, we keep pushing this 1.50 limit. We're not there this year, maybe not next year, but in some point in time, we'll be looking at that number. But this year, we're still able to stay below it.
Is that the maximum, 1.5?
It is for us at this time. Other cities have gone to 1.75. We can do that if we need to, but right now, that's where we're capped at.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to offer 1.4690. The reason
1.49.
being that it rises, so we go through this every year, and there's never a right or wrong. This
Right.
is subjective. And so I look for balance. And right now, if you balance the average single family increase at 1.4690, it's 2.84%. And the average commercial increase is 2.85%. I'm looking for basically the tide raises both those boats equally.
But you're looking just at single family, not all residential, and that's what I looked at.
Fair enough. You are accurate. I did do that.
So the residential
and-
factor is 3.41% increases versus 2.80 for commercial.
Yeah, the reason I chose single family is because, as you can see, and most of us, I know that the audience and people thinking about this today says, well, if you look in the narrative, which I do, the average house, single family house went up 10%. The average condo didn't go up that high, but the average 2 and 3 family houses went up over 16 and 17% respectively. And I think that skews the numbers. They're a smaller sample than the other the condos. 2 and 3 family are smaller sample sets than the single family house, and you know that from past experience, I go through my spreadsheet and crunch all sorts of numbers, and I felt that we can no longer go to 66%. We used to do a 66-33. That's above 1.5. And we're not going to go back to the uniform tax code. That would kill the residents. So it's trying to figure out, and if we stayed at the current rates, there's different effects of staying at 1.4222 or staying at the current 1266. Of those 5 or 6 options, I just find that, to me, that's the most palatable. But it's open for discussion. So it's really between 1.4690 and your recommendation of 1.4750.
Right, and then there's the middle compromise, 1.4720. to
There's that
consider.
too.
Let's look at that.
That would have an increase for the single-family home of 2.75%.
Yes,
With respect, and it would be $191 on average, obviously. It would have an effect of decreasing the condominiums by 0.65%. So condos go down. Two-family goes up 7.79 because they had one of the highest increases, and three-family, all residential is 3.23 compared to 311. To me, that's palatable. Now you're kind of cutting. How thin can you cut the bread? I'd be fine with 1.4720 as well.
so I'd like to hear from other members on a number that they may think is appropriate. Matt, do you have any thoughts?
Other than, for that factor that the chair proposed, the 1.4750, how does that equate to the residential versus the SIP split? Is there a percentage on this spreadsheet that notes that?
It doesn't.
Okay, so typically, I think we would see sort of like a two-thirds, one-third type.
Yeah, but I think Gardner alluded, it's hard to do that with where we're at.
Although it's actually, yeah, you can't see it on the spreadsheet that was provided in hand, but it is on the one that was provided to us in an Excel spreadsheet.
Yep.
And the split at the chairman's recommendation is a 67.87 to 32.1258 split. Mine varies just a little bit to 68.32.
There's not much of a difference.
Yeah, no, there isn't there. You can't go to 66.33 anymore because that's higher than the 1.5.
And that's what you said before.
Can we do the 1.4710?
What did you say, Maureen?
1.4710? How does that,
Well, it's just another number in the
I
same
know.
range that we have.
just a little bit?
And the difference between,
There's no difference in the dollar amount on the single families.
So I had an additional question. So how does the, an audience member, a resident, calculate the actual increase for a typical tax bill? And I'm not sure what typical is.
They go visit John.
So do we have an average kind of home valuation and an average kind of per se of a tax bill? And we could,
I think that's what this column is.
Yeah, if you look at the first page, it has the average
Oh, I see.
single-family value.
because that's what people
yeah,
really
right at
care
the
about.
top
at
here
the
in
Yeah.
the
end of the day.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, but they don't know what their value is
Yeah,
until they get their tax bill, and,
Well, the values are on my website.
Yeah.
The Patriot database isn't updated yet, but there is a PDF listed by street on the assessor's page, where you can look at your FY '23 values.
So this column, I think, the difference column,
That's the difference between this year and last year.
I see.
For
And
each
that's,
one.
so that's what people would want to know, right? How much is my tax bill going to go up from the previous?
Right, and it's based on,
FY22?
for the single family, it's based on a house with a value of $605,754.
605, okay. And then for this factor that we're discussing, the 1.4750, so average per se is $185?
yes.
Increase, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, all right. All right,
At that value.
thank you for that info. All set.
David, do you have any comment or insight into a number?
Only this question, Dan, were you proposing 1.4750 as a fair?
I was, in my mind, as a fair percentage increase to all categories.
Because that feels, from what I can understand of it, that seems fair to me.
So my motion is 1.4750, if there's a second.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, comments?
Yeah, I have another question. So we talked about residential, but what's the impact to commercial?
Well, it's a 3.31% increase, or $1,224.
That's across, so it'd be across
That's on the
board.
far right.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, on the
I don't
far
think
right?
I don't think there's any typical commercial building.
No, again, it's just the average.
It's an
'cause, You know,
average.
you have small office buildings that are, office condos that are a couple $100,000, and then you have multi-million-dollar
Big
facilities,
boxes,
so.
yeah. So when we talk about commercial, we're talking about the property itself and not the business that is.
Correct, it's the property.
Property itself, okay.
Plus their personal property inside,
If it's owner occupied.
if it's owner occupied.
And just for clarity, Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Yes, please.
yours is based on, I'm showing my screen, all residents, which is 3.15, or the average of all residents for a difference of 212. But truly, the people who are going to feel it the most are the two-family, where they're going to see an average increase of $544. Condominiums are going to drop. If you own a condo, you're getting a $33
With,
reduction,
with all
which is
those,
great.
with all these ranges that we're talking about, all the condos get a decrease.
Yeah, I do. No, I understand. I just
Right.
wanted, you were working on the blended and I was working on the single versus CIP.
No, I looked at what my increase would be for my three-family.
Yep.
And another question, for the commercial, when you talk about personal property, I heard you say equipment, but what about inventory? Does that come into play?
Depending on the type of property, yeah, and it's what they have in stock on January 1st.
I see. And that's information that's provided to you by the
Every
owner?
year, every year they're supposed to send me what's called a form of list, which lists what they have. We also do field checks on it.
So for example, an auto dealer would, their personal property would be all the vehicles on the lot?
No, because a lot of them, if you look at how they operate, this isn't all of them, but some of them, quite a few of them, they don't actually own the inventory until they sell it.
I see, okay.
You know, if it's someone like, I believe like Toyota owns the car until they sell it, and then,
Okay,
so it depends how the business is set up to run.
okay, that's great, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. We'll take a roll call vote on the 1.4750. Maureen?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes,
David?
Yes?
Gardner?
Yes.
Dan, yes. Thank you. So,
Okay, just for the record, the .8677 is the residential factor, which is technically what the,
so the motion will be to adopt a .8677. Is that what you want, John?
that was the 1.475, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, .8677 is the residential factor.
So can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved?
Second?
Okay, that's on number one, motion to adopt the CIP, personal property and shift as 8677. Maureen?
Yes.
Matt?
yes,
David?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
Dan, yes. Number five, motion to grant authority to the Board of Assessors to sign on behalf of the Select Board or the DOR Gateway.
I move item 5.
That's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? What's DOR Gateway?
That's a Department of Revenue, that's the state site where we input all this data and then they approve it.
I hope you have better luck than I do on their tax, their tax exemption site.
I agree.
We have a motion and a second. Gardner?
Looks like we lost Gardner.
David?
Yes.
Matt?
yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Dan? 4 with 1 abstention. Anything else you need from us, John?
The only other thing, I was going to briefly give you an update on the Elderly and Disabled Taxation Fund.
It's the next agenda item.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. John, there was a time when there wouldn't be an empty seat in this room for this tax classification.
Is it me?
I must be. Or it's Rodney, I guess. Thank you. The board will hear a report from the Elderly and Disabled Taxation Fund Committee. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without further ado, I'll turn it right back over to Mr. LaBelle.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right, just wanted to give you an update. The committee met a couple times back in June and July to come up with our application process and our qualifications, which we left kind of broad. What we did is we found a few communities in the state that are operating a similar fund. So we kind of looked over their qualifications and their applications, and we kind of cherry-picked what we thought was the best out of those.
May I add a little bit? Sure. I'm going to take a little step backward and then give it right back to John. So the staff realized around a year ago that the town had opted into a program where people could donate $1 on their property tax bills into an elderly and disabled tax fund. Current staff realized that after adopting that, no committee had ever been formed to allocate funds out of that. So with the support of the select board, Jill Summit, John LaBelle, and Rodney Conley worked on making some recommendations for a committee. So the committee is comprised of Joe Collins, our retired town clerk, Peter Karpusik, our retired business manager in DPW, and Sally Calhoun, who served for many, many years on our finance committee. And they work with the chief assessor and the treasurer collector statutorily. And so what John's presenting tonight is their recommendations based on the research that they did with the support of this board.
Yeah.
And if you were about to say that, I apologize, but I
No,
wanted to set some context.
that's fine. And you should have a packet. And the packet contains a one-page overview. And then it has what we call our application guidelines, definitions, and eligibility for fiscal year '23. So we were kind of aiming, we have statutory exemptions, and a couple of them are based on income and assets. And every once in a while, someone won't qualify based on some assets are a little bit too high or their income is a little bit too high. So we try to bump up the income a little bit so maybe those people could slide in under here. Again, the committee really has some leeway into who we grant funds to. The state doesn't have really strict guidelines like they do on the statutory exemptions. So we just came up with some basic definitions for elderly, disabled, residency, assets, and things like that, which you can find in your packet. And our goal is to put some information about this on the tax bill, just a couple lines, and then there'll be additional information on the assessor's webpage with more information for people that are interested in finding out more about it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was just going to say, there's no action required of the board tonight, but I think what John is looking for is feedback that he can take back to the committee and potentially amend or update what they've put together as a draft.
Okay, so if I may, just to get a sense for the folks at home. Two of the members of this board are over 62. So based upon that, would be considered as elderly. One of the members, and I'm not too sure, but could qualify for a disability. So both those would count towards moving forwards? They wouldn't get it automatically?
It's not automatic, no.
Oh, not at that point?
No.
They need to own their abode as of a date. So that's, we all qualify there on this board. Assets, other than the home? The home doesn't count?
The primary residence does not count, no.
Does, okay,
As it doesn't, in the statutory exemptions, it does not count as
Okay.
either. If you own a second home, we would count that.
you would count a second home, not, what if it was not in Danvers?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It can be in Florida, it can be in California, it can be in Danvers. Yeah.
Okay, so cars, boats, stock, bonds, mutual funds, brokerage accounts, CDs, IRA, checking accounts, pensions, annuity funds, all determine your eligibility?
We would look at all that, yeah.
Would look at
Yeah,
all that.
We look at all those for the statutory exemptions as well. That's kind of where we picked that from.
Okay,
We want to make sure, we're giving this to people that actually do need the funds.
okay, so someone with stocks, bonds, brokerage, CDs, IRA, more than likely wouldn't qualify for this program.
Again,
Mostly.
based on what the balances are, maybe, maybe not.
Well, if they have all the above, they gotta
Right.
have something.
Right.
What is other?
Well, that's extraordinary circumstances. We just kind of left that open. I don't want to give too many examples just to give people ideas, but, if you're having some sort of hardship and maybe just a one-time off, we'll consider it. Again, it doesn't mean you'll necessarily qualify.
Well, if you have a financial obligation that you're having trouble managing, that you might then qualify for this?
Again, depending on what it is. We
Right,
we
right,
we
depending.
want some documentation on what it
All right.
is, yeah.
So, I don't know how I could advise somebody to make the effort to fill out a 4-page application to try to get some amount of money if you got money in the bank, expenses, income. I don't know, it just seems onerous to me for somebody over 62 that may be disabled, doesn't have a lot of money, and they want to take advantage of this to have to go out and hire a CPA to fill out 4 pages.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
maybe somebody at the senior center could help them,
Well, maybe.
right?
Yeah, maybe there's somebody there that can help them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd volunteer to help, if that helped.
Just, I know we're trying to spend the money and help people out, but it just,
Yeah, again, we were kind of following the state application that we found, and, they require a lot of this information for this fund and the statutory exemptions. So we're just kind of trying to follow some sort of guidelines that are already established.
And I think as the assessor said, if a resident came to the office, the counter in the assessing office, staff would certainly help them understand the process and the discretion that he's describing. If you had a resident who satisfied most but not all of these, but truly had an extenuating circumstance, the form here and in most places allows some discretion for the committee to consider that when making these decisions.
For example, the statutory exemptions, you have to be 65, and sometimes someone will come in and they're 64, and I can't give it to them. So this would give us an opportunity to help those people out a little bit if they're not quite
all right.
meeting those.
So my feedback is it looks onerous for somebody who's elderly to try to, they'll need help filling that out.
Oh,
They'll need help finding their bills.
we can help them fill it out.
And we do that today
Yeah.
with the other existing programs.
Yeah, but I don't, is the other existing program application as intense as this?
Yeah.
It's just, it is?
The
I've
state
never seen it
applications are all, 3 to 4 pages, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Good.
you need to look at tax returns and bank statements and all
No,
that.
I understand, but, okay, Maureen, any comments?
None? No, thank you.
Matt?
Yes, what's the current dollar amount of this fund?
I don't know the exact number, it's around, 35,000, I think.
Okay. All right. Maybe it should be higher. We failed to pass a motion earlier that would create a residential exemption, but perhaps we should create a motion to sort of fund this pool to make it bigger, right? So if someone's struggling to stay in their home that they've lived in for many years, that would help them to.
Yeah, I'm not
Well,
sure.
we do have a program for elderly, vets, disabled, blind folks, and this is to capture those people that fall out of that program. They don't qualify for that. So we have already adopted a program. What's the chapter?
Well, those are state statutory exemptions.
Right,
you're-
but
you're
we've
referring to.
adopted a certain level of,
Correct, you actually doubled them if you.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And for dollar-wise, we're looking to grant a similar amount as we do for those.
Okay. It's to increase the pool of people that can qualify for
Okay.
some
All
assistance.
right, well, it's a good idea. I know other states,
what happened there.
I think of New York State where they have the STAR program where it's kind of, it's managed by the state and it has to do with, in that case, it has to do with school property taxes. You're all set.
All
Thank
set.
you.
David, any comments?
No, thank you, Dan.
Gardner, comments?
No, I'm looking at the application, and I think it's appropriate. Age doesn't always equate to need. So I would want the money that I pay in taxes going to people who have demonstrated need. And if someone needs it and they're gonna be willing to fill out a 3-page document, I mean, the 4th page is just a signature line. I don't think it's too much to ask.
Yeah, and,
Thank you.
and just to clarify, for the disabled part, you don't have to be, I don't believe you need to be the 62. That's just to qualify as elderly. So if there's some disability and you're not 62, you could still apply.
Okay, interesting. Okay, very good. All right, you have our comments.
Okay, thank you very much. That's
thank
all I
you.
had for you.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, could I make a
Yes,
comment?
please.
That the 3 people identified as the committee couldn't possibly be a better feeling committee to me. Those people are very properly, carefully chosen.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
the board will review the town manager's fiscal year 2022 evaluation. So for the folks at home, all 5 of the select board members went through and rated the manager on various categories. The broad category is strategic and major performance, objective. The second major category is a operational performance, objective. And the third is strategic items that came up during the year. And we score anywhere from 1 to 5, with 5 obviously being the highest. And we take an average, add them up, take an average, the weight, everything is weighted. And at the end of the exercise, the overall rating for the manager was 4.14, which exceeds expectations. Comments from members of the board, David?
Nothing, I just think that the town manager has done a very, very fine job of administrating the town and all of its 350 employees to protect $6.5 billion worth of real estate and to deal with extraordinary items like COVID, the Essex Aggie controversy and other things. And I think that I'm very grateful that he is our manager, and I applaud his service.
Thank you. Gardner?
Yeah, I would echo what Select Board Member Mills said. I was on the selection criteria that hired Steve, and I've never regretted that decision. Is everybody infallible? Of course, not everybody's infallible. And we've offered some communication back to him, each of us, with some areas for potential improvement or discussion. But overall, I rated him very high. I think my numbers were in the 4s as well. My overall average, some were 5s, some were 4s, and a couple, maybe a 1 or 2 3s. But even at 3, that's meets expectations. So I'm very pleased, and I'm comfortable that I've provided the town manager with the feedback I felt was pertinent. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen?
I did not rate the town manager as high as my other members. I mentioned that I'm concerned about the employee retention, which Steve is going to be working on, that we're going to have more discussions why people are leaving. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Matt?
Well, thank you. So I rated the town manager at 3.89 out of possible 5. And that equates to meets or exceeds expectations. I think that we, as a town, we receive performance from the town manager that's year over year is very consistent and predictable. And I'll echo Mr. Mills' comment that we are lucky to have Mr. Bartha managing our town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
And then I rated on each category 3.4 to 4.5, coming up with an average of around 4.07, I believe. I can't really remember, but the overall rating, again, is 4.14, exceeds expectations. And per our Management Compensation Act, he would be entitled to a 2% COLA plus a 1.5% merit raise for exceeding expectations. Is there a motion to that effect?
Yes, I so moved, to that effect.
Is there a second?
Second?
Matt was first. Thank you, Gardner. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call. Maureen?
No.
Matt?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
Dan, yes. Passes 4-1. Thank you. Steve, thank you for your efforts on behalf of the town this past year. We look forward to working with you going forwards. And we'll go pivot right into the town manager's proposed goals and objectives for fiscal 2023. I think you all got a list of the potential strategic major objectives on the list, and we're not going to vote tonight. We're going to look at it, discuss it, add, subtract, and come back next meeting for consensus on what his goals will be. The first one is secure DCAM property and state property and begin design of the DPW yard. That's land up at the state hospital. Continue to work with the regional and state partners on water storage capacity. Oversee development of community-wide strategic plan, estimated December 23 completion. Work with staff and stakeholders to finalize the climate action CASPA plan. Launch the student-driven school town advisory committee in partnership with DPS. Initiate the process to evaluate feasibility of the in-house operation of the town transfer station. Prepare policy recommendations for select board on plastic bottle / single-use plastic ban in Danvers. And I'm going to add to the list, and everybody else have a chance to add, work to restore the MBTA bus stop in downtown Danvers. If you'd add that to your list. And at this time, if anybody has anything else they want to add, now would
Mr.
be the
Chairman, I don't know
time.
if it should be a goal or just a request. I'd like to, the topic of water capacity and our water bans come up every year. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be beneficial to have a public hearing to describe our current state of applications or efforts so that the public can hear exactly what we're trying to do as a town, what our limitations are, where we have applied in the past and been shot down by the Army Corps of Engineers and all the other permutations of and recommendations for solutions, and seek public input as to other opportunities.
Thank
So I'm
you.
looking for a public hearing.
And I think that's a reasonable request to have a hearing at some point in the coming months on the water storage. 16 communities have entered into an agreement to look at water storage, water use, et cetera. But they need a consensus of all 16 communities to do anything. So I would like to hear back from Steve on those efforts and where he feels that group and working with the partners will go at some point in time. Again, do we hook up to the Quabbin Reservoir as an option, but perhaps we'll get a update from Steve at some point on that time, but I don't think we'll add it to a goal.
That's fine,
Is
thank
that
you.
okay? David, anything you want to add?
No, except that, to follow up on Gardner's comments, lots of us in the town were really apprehensive about whether or not we could flush our toilets tomorrow. So the question of available water resource, state requirements and all of that is something that, people want to know about. So
Yep.
that fits in, I think, with the second stated goal, so I don't think anything more needs to be said. We've got to be careful and let people know that they're going to be able to have drinking water here.
Anything else to add to the list?
No, Dan, thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, just one, dealing with the rail trail extension that's heading towards Middleton. So Phase 2 is the segment that is from Nichols Street out to the post office, and it goes through the highway corridor of 95 and Route 1. So the goal would be to work with Mass Department of Transportation and also with Representative Kearns to obtain funding or have DOT actually do the work. And that's a critical component of this trail extension, because as many know, we're working on Phase 1 now that goes from Hobart Street out to College Pond into Nickel Street, and we're also working on the segment that runs from Kirkbride Drive, I think it is, out to the Middleton line. So that middle section is critical in order to make it a safe extension and safe for pedestrians and bicyclists. So I think that's maybe not a year-long goal, it's kind of multi-year, but I think it's important to add to the list.
Thank you. And I would ask Steve, I'm sure what Matt's requested is certainly specific, what we want to accomplish, but is it achievable in a reasonable time? Is that goal realistic at this time?
I think we often use goals that can be advanced during the period but not completed. So Smith School was on the list for a couple of years. The DPW yard has been on there for a couple of years. Phase 1 is in process. We have a commitment from the DOT to partner with us on Phase 2. Phase 3 remains to be worked on. So certainly I think it would be appropriate to add to the list for conversation.
Thank you. We'll add that to the list. Remembering, gentlemen and ladies, we're going to take this list and pare it down to 5.
Right, didn't we number them last year by priority, was it?
Yeah, we'll do that.
we'll do that.
Anything you want to add, Maureen?
Well, I like your MBTA and Matt's Rail Trail, and maybe some more discussion with the Beverly Airport study on, where we're at with that.
Well, it's still the Beverly Airport. It's not
I know,
ours.
well,
So,
right.
And we'll be getting an update in the near future for the public on the airport, on what they're planning to do.
Yeah, and maybe have, like a goal, maybe have him form some subcommittees for like with the transfer station for people that know about the trash and can help out. That would be nice to, have, I don't know, that's what I would.
Well, you're interested in evaluating the feasibility of the?
Yes.
Okay, so that's already on there.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
we can decide if we want
priority.
that. Yep, it's on the list. Anything else that you had, Gardner?
I'll leave this to your discretion, whether it's a task or a goal, but I'd like to see some planning relating to the development and utilization of LaBelle's Grove. We have a jewel, everybody speaks about what a jewel of a park Endicott Park is. I'm not sure that we can't add another jewel to our crown by revitalizing LaBelle's Grove.
All right, we'll put LaBelle's Grove on the list for discussion. That
Thank you.
gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That gives us 10 goals to whittle down to 5. So,
Thank you.
I prepared to go forward tonight, but I think we'll let the members digest this, think about it. And at the next meeting, everybody will rate their top 5 in order, and based upon how that looks will be the 5 goals for the manager. So take it home, think about it, and come back, be prepared next meeting to promote your top 5. Any other questions? Steve, any comments?
No, I think that's a good list. I appreciate the input. And I'll bring it back. I'll wordsmith those ideas into goals, and then we can discuss them on the 6th.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Board. The manager will report to the board on various items of interest. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few updates tonight. We had the strategic plan kickoff event held virtually on November 9th. We had close to 40 participants. 2 select board members, as best I could tell, were on. Mr. Doug and Mr. Trask joined us for that. Again, we had close to 40 residents participating, and the consulting team provided a slightly more refined version of the presentation that this board had and the leadership team had at their meeting last month. And the project website is now live. It's strategic.danversma.gov, strategic.danversma.gov. And you'll find project details. That's the landing page if you want updates. There's space there to sign up for email alerts if you want to be kept updated on next steps and opportunities to participate. There's an interactive map where people can pin assets in town that they love and offer comments on how they want to see those preserved or improved, big ideas, focus areas to kind of visually depict some of the things that we're talking about as part of the strategic plan process. And looking ahead, we don't have a date yet, but probably around the 3rd week in January is when the consulting team is going to be trying to hold its large in-person visioning session. So there will be a lot of press about that in advance and on social media and the newspaper, out to try to get as many people to come to that as possible. So I thought the kickoff went really well. The team from Stantec did a nice job, and I think getting 40 people to tune in at this early stage was a good sign. You received a flyer tonight from DEEP. It's a partnership between DEEP and the town to sort of reimagine the holiday festival. So in addition to the tree lighting in the downtown this year, DEEP and Recreation have partnered to provide events throughout the day for families. So that is on December 3rd. Again, we'll be pushing this out widely. I believe it's already on social media, but we'll be making sure that it's out in advance of the event. But there will be events from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Endicott Park that day. They're calling that the Winter Wonderland, where there will be crafts and games, and Rockland Trust is going to be sponsoring Santa there for pictures. I shouldn't say sponsoring. They'll be inviting him from the North Pole down to Endicott Park for the day and covering his travel expenses for that. There will be the traditional tree lighting at 5 p.m., and there will be a flashlight candy cane hunt at Plains Park starting at 6:15 to 7:30 that day. So kudos to the staff at Endicott Park for thinking creatively on how to make this an even bigger event than it was. And that'll be, I think, well received. And then a reminder, Town Hall will be closed tomorrow to the public. Town staff will be here. We are bringing back an event that we held prior to COVID, where we'll be going through retention records and giving staff a chance to clean out their files and reorganize things so that they can provide even better service to the public. And one of the features tomorrow will be, and this is a public service announcement, there will be a professional confidential shredder on site from 10 to 3, and the public is welcome to bring materials. That was advertised. We've had a lot of positive feedback from the community. One individual said that he had, I think, 6 banker boxes of stuff, and when he found out he didn't have to pull staples or remove CDs, he was ecstatic on the phone. We thought he was jumping up and down in the background. So that's a service at no cost. So anyone who wants to bring their shredding down to Town Hall tomorrow to participate in that would be welcome to do so. It was really well received last time. It gave staff a chance to really call things that didn't need to be taking up space anymore, and a lot easier to find things for people when they come in and need any service from the town. So those are my updates. Thank you.
Thank you. No consent calendar this month, okay. Correspondence, I do want to bring up that I did receive a correspondence from a Preston Street resident concerned with the student parking on Preston Street from the Essex Tech. They're actually parking very close to the fire hydrant. I passed that off on to DTAC Aaron Henry, who has put that on the agenda for tomorrow's meeting at 2. But the resident told me that there was temporary fencing and signs have been put up to prevent the parking on Preston Street. So it looks like perhaps the tech is being a good neighbor and followed through on the resident's concern, and I know that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Just as a Preston is a public street, and DTAC is going to be discussing this. We think it's appropriate that the tech advise its students not to park. We had an issue last year on Prentice Street. It is not appropriate for the tech to be prohibiting parking on a public way, so that's something DTAC will be discussing in terms of working with the school to make sure that the student handbook is being enforced, but that the residents aren't deprived of parking spaces on a public way.
Good. Who put the fencing up?
At the school.
Their school?
Yes.
Thank you, okay. Very good, thank you. So that's, hopefully will be resolved. At this time, anyone else with correspondence, new business updates? Now's the time for your closing comments. Maureen?
There's a meeting Thursday night, Danvers Housing. Everybody's welcome to come at 5:30. That's really about it. We had a pretty intense meeting tonight, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Thank you. Matt?
Yes, thank you. So I also received the same message from the resident on Prentice Street, and I'm familiar with how neighborhoods around Salem State were also impacted by students parking, not just for classes, but for the entire day. And I think they instituted a sort of a permit parking to allow residents to only park in those areas. So that may be something that the Traffic Advisory Committee may want to visit. Let's see what else I have. Next Thursday is Thanksgiving. It seems like it was only it was summer just a few days ago, and now it's the end of November. So I hopefully everyone has gotten their second booster shot and a flu shot, so everyone can spend time with their friends and family and stay safe. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we continue, sorry I forgot to ask our town clerk and election official for an election update on the 8th, which was over a week ago.
Thank you.
Have we counted everything?
Almost everything. It's the never-ending election. We do have one more counting session that would cover ballots received from overseas by mail by Friday this week. So I don't expect very many of those. But for the most part, we have all the numbers tallied. So our election workers processed just over 12,000 votes. We had included just under 6,000 early votes by mail and in person. The turnout for Election Day was 55%. I want to be sure to thank, in no particular order, the Registrar of Voters, the DPW, IT, Police Department, School Department, Town Hall staff that helped out on Election Day, Stephanie, Janelle, and Joyce in the clerk's office, who organized every detail leading up to and on Election Day, the tax office for sharing their space for our supply since August, and a special thanks and appreciation to the election workers who make it all come together. And the good news is we only have one election in 2023, and we'll use the time to continue to build a strong team going into the 2024 election cycle.
Great. Do you think that in the future you'll get that same 50% turnout for early and mail-in voting?
Generally, what I've found with the early voting process is that half the people who vote early. I did go back, interestingly enough, I went back and looked at 2018's election results, and we were within 500 votes of that.
Oh, split between the two?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Okay, interesting, very good. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Sorry I didn't call on you sooner.
That's okay.
All right, I know you'll remind me.
I will.
David?
Thank you, Dan. Congratulations and applause to the town clerk for doing a splendid job, not only on election, but on the minutes of our meetings and keeping the board organized. She does a great job. I also want to, and I don't say it often enough, I think the chair of this board does an enormous amount of work, and it makes a huge difference to the way we are governed in this town and do our business. So a special thanks to you, Dan. I also would like to remind people that the Danvers Senior Center down on Stone Street is, number one, a great building facility. It's very, very well run. There are all kinds of activities, including all kinds of food activities and meal opportunities. The one that Mr. Bradstreet and I go to regularly and like will be Monday night, November 28th, the next men's club meeting. We have a very, very interesting fellow coming in to talk about crime lab cases and true crime stories. It sounds wonderful. The dinner will include Yankee pot roast and everything else that is really yummy. So the newsletter is available to anybody who would like to have it mailed to them. It's also available online, and so I encourage people who are my age to take advantage of the wonderful programs down there and get together with your friends, come with your friends, come and meet new friends. It's a wonderful place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just
Yes,
chime in
please,
for
go
a
right
minute
ahead.
and say, thank you, David. But I do want to point out that Ann Freitas in the town manager's office helps tremendously with helping me put the minutes together. So
She sure does.
I take the notes and she reads my handwriting, and then we work together to come up with a final product.
Thank you, Kathy. I don't want to overlook Ann
Of course not.
because I've been, she's been holding me together for years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gardner?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just a point of order. We had executive session today, discussed the evaluation with the town manager that we received, and then brought back that discussion to the board and they vote on the salary increase. But there were two other items that I believe we do have to take a public vote on. Could I ask through you to the town manager if those require a public vote?
Steve?
Yes, anything discussed in executive session must then also be voted on in public session.
Do you have a copy of what we discussed?
I do, I have a copy of what we discussed.
So we already voted on the salary adjustment. Number 2, termination severance pay, subsection A, increase the termination notice pay in the contract from 6 months to 9 months in addition to the 3 months provided in the Town Manager Act for a total of 12 months. Is there a motion?
I move that that be adopted.
So moved.
David made the motion, Gardner seconded it. Maureen?
Thank you.
No.
Matt?
I had a comment.
Okay.
So can you just, for those that, in the audience, can you just describe how this would be, come to fruition?
If the town managers will let go without cause by a future board, he would then be given a termination notice pay of 12 months.
Okay, great, thank
He
you.
left on his own, that's his business.
Yep, I understand. All right, thank you, I'm in favor.
Okay. David?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
Dan, yes, thank you. The other was benefits, to strike the Section B life insurance in its entirety and amend Section E of the contract retirement allowance as follows. The town shall provide the town manager with retirement allowance equal to 9.5% of the manager's annual base salary. The retirement allowance shall be paid monthly and shall be prorated by any period less than a full year. At the town manager's option, the retirement allowance shall be paid directly to his 457 retirement account with the International City Management Association Retirement Corporation. Is there a motion?
Move that it be
There's a
adopted.
motion, Mr. Chairman, and as I recall, this is a cost-neutral effect, that the section we're striking is the life insurance we provide for the town manager contractually, and he has indicated he has private life insurance to cover that need and is just shifting the funding from life insurance to his retirement.
It is cost neutral, you're correct, thank you. So did we have a motion?
Yes,
So I move.
Gardner, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Matt,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes,
Maureen,
No,
and Dan, yes. Thank you, Gardner, for bringing that up. Anything else, Gardner?
and I have no other correspondence, sir. Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to, we had a great turnout for the Veterans Day ceremony last Friday at the high school. Very well run by Mr. Moody, Colonel Moody, and his committee. It went off very well. It was very nice to be in the high school auditorium. It was great to be in the presence of people for the ceremony. So that was well done, thank you. And happy Thanksgiving to all. And again, remember the vets. When you see a vet, please say thank you. And at this point in time, we'll adjourn the meeting at 7:59.
Thank you.